comes, we have enough space for the timeline.
Taking Kurt.
What about the Dapa?
Okay. Did you have any catching up to do, or we just stopped?
I think we're just,
Okay. In the middle of a chapter? Yeah, middle of a chapter. Page 6, my bookmark's on 620, is that right? My mind is a blank. What's happening?
I can't remember.
Oh, you know, commercial. She married this other. Right, and then, oh, is this the dream? Yeah. So he went to the cave. He insisted on going to the cave, and they lowered him down by a rope, and they're saying, please don't do this. He's like, oh, I have to go do this. And then he gets down to the bottom and he takes a nap. But he thinks he's asleep for 3 days, and it's actually only an hour. So now he's relating the dream that he had. Is that right? 620? Yeah. Okay. Now, because our author does nothing by accident or just to go off on some weird tangent, what is this? What is this about?
Is this a representation or something?
Yes.
About what?
He's got a crystalline palace. He's got Durante or Durandarte and
Dante.
Valerma. They're cousins and one killed the other, is that right? But he didn't hold it against, and so he's wandering around not at peace.
Who's wandering around not at peace?
Valermo. Wasn't Valermo the one who could, or was Durandante? At those words, the wretched Durandante cried out loud, goes, oh, my cousin Montesinos, it was the last thing I asked you, that as soon as I was dead and my spirit had departed, you should bear my heart to where fair Valerma dwelt and waited, cutting it out from my chest with a sword or with a dagger. Oh, that's right. He said, cut out my heart and take it to my wife.
So Dante's wandering around.
Dante?
Oh, I mean during Dante.
Yeah. Heartless.
Heartless. Did he?
Oh, you bring up a really good point. Is this heaven or is this purgatory that he's dreaming about? There's a soul that's not at rest. There's people. Has anything like this happened in Divine Comedy?
Did he go inside of it?
Hey,
He
are
came to the Crystalline Palace. Let's
I
see.
think it is like Dante because he came to Dante couldn't actually go in heaven.
Brought me into the Crystalline Palace, yeah.
Maybe it was the representation because he saw
We're
it.
in a low hall of extreme coolness, and all alabaster stood a marble sepulchre made with great craftsmanship, on which I saw a knight lying at full length, wrought not in brass nor marble nor carved jasper, as is usual on other tombs, but of pure flesh and bone. He had in his right hand, which seemed to me somewhat hairy and muscular, a sign of great strength in its owner, resting beside his heart. And before I could ask Montesinos any question, he saw me gaze with amazement at the figure on the sepulchre and said, this is my friend, Durandarte, flower and mirror of all true lovers and valiant knights of his age. He is kept here enchanted, as am I, and many more knights and ladies by Merlin, the French wizard, who they say was the devil's own son. So if the knight is representing the Christian and his heart is cut out, and he's enchanted by the French, any ideas? I have no idea what's going on.
I thought Don Quixote was every Christian. They might have been. So they're at Merlin's palace, right? Merlin's.
It has to do, I'm sure it has to do with the Protestant Reformation, and I'm sure it has to do with, were the Huguenots already a thing in France?
No, I think it's about the communion. Because Don Quixote's looking on. They're in Merlin's palace, right?
Yes.
So couldn't the knight with his heart cut out be Jesus? And they're looking on like the host. for the sacrifice.
Oh.
Mm.
That's interesting.
Because the Protestants threw away communion.
Yes, they do. So they cut the heart right out of the matter. Something is like the Christian laying there dead and they're cutting the heart out of it. If the Christian represents the body of like the church, right? They cut his heart right out. If you're going to take away Holy Communion, the Mass, confession, all the grace, really, merit, anything you can merit by your own intention. The last thing I asked you to do, that as soon as I was dead and my spirit had departed, you should bear my heart to where fair Valerma dwelt and waited, cutting it out from my chest with a sword or knife. When the venerable Montesinos heard, I'm sorry, I backed up to the middle of 617. I'm at the right after the quote of the poem on 617. He threw himself on his knees before the afflicted knight and cried with tears in his eyes, long ago, Sir Durandarte, my dearest cousin, long ago I did what you bade me on that bitter day of our defeat. I tore out your heart as best I could and left not a fragment of it in your bosom. I wiped it with a lace handkerchief. I set out with it on the road to France, having first laid you in the bosom of the earth with enough tears to wash my hands clean of the bloodstains they had gotten groping in your entrails. And for further proof, beloved cousin, at the first place I came to, after leaving Roskilde, I threw a little salt in on your heart so that it would not smell bad, but should come, if not fresh, at least dry, into the presence of the Lady Valerma, whom the sage Merlin had kept here many years, enchanted with you and me. Your squire, Guardiana, mistress, Ruierda, Dira, her 7 daughters and 2 nieces, and many others of your acquaintances and friends. Yet though 500 years have passed, not one of us has died. Only Rudira, her daughters and nieces, are missing, whom out of the compassion he must have had for their tears, Merlin turned them into as many lagoons, which are now known in the world as the living, and in the province of La Mancha as the lagoons of Rudira. The 7 belong to the kings of Spain, and the 2 nieces to the knights of the most holy order, that of St. John. Guardiana, your squire, also bewailed your sad fate and was converted into a river called by his name. This is sounding like a Greek myth. But when he reached the earth's surface and saw the sun of another sky, so great was his grief at finding he had abandoned you that he plunged into the bowels of the earth. Yet it is not possible for him to cease flowing in his natural course. From time to time he emerges and shows himself where the sun and mankind may see him. The lagoons I have spoken of minister their waters to him, and with these and many others he enters Portugal in pomp and grandeur. But for all that, wherever he goes, he shows his sorrow and melancholy, and takes no pride in breeding savory and valuable fish in his waters, but unlike the golden Tagus, bears only coarse and tasteless ones. And what I am now telling you, my dear cousin, I have told you many times, but as you do not reply, I imagine either that you do not believe me or that you do not hear, which, God knows, pains me greatly. Now, however, I want to give you some fresh news which may not serve to assuage your grief, but will in no way increase it. Learn that you have here in your presence, open your eyes and see him, that great knight of whom the sage Merlin has prophesied so much. The Don Quixote de la Mancha, I tell you, who has revived and improved on the ancient art of chivalry, which is now forgotten. Though his meditation and favor, through his mediation and favor too, we ourselves may perhaps be disenchanted, for great deeds are reserved for great men. And if that should not be, replied the afflicted Durandarte in a faint whisper, if that should not be, cousin, I say, patience, and shuffle the cards. And turning upon his side, he resumed his customary silence and said not one word more. What? At this moment, loud screams and cries were heard, accompanied by deep groans and anguished sobs. I turned my head and saw through the crystal walls a procession of most lovely maidens passing in 2 files through the hall, all dressed in mourning with white turbans on their heads, after the Turkish fashion. At the tail end of the files came a lady, as by her gravity she seemed, also dressed in black, with a white veil so ample and long to kiss the ground. Her turban was twice as long as the greatest of the others. She was beetle-browed and somewhat flat-nosed, with a large mouth and red lips. Her teeth, which she sometimes bared, appeared to be few and not very well placed, although they were as white as peeled almonds. She bore in her hands a fine cloth, and in it, as far as could be made out, a heart of mummy flesh. So dry and shriveled was it. Okay, so here's Valerma, and this is the funeral procession, or Okay, then they were gonna fight about beauty. I am amazed, I turned the page, I am amazed, though, said Sancho, that your worship didn't spring out at the old dodderer and kick his bones to pulp and pull out his beard till there wasn't any hair left. No, Sancho, my friend, because he was insulting Dulcinea. Replied Don Quixote, it would not have been right for me to do that. For we are all obliged to respect the aged, even if they are not knights, but all the more so when they are such and under an enchantment. And I know well enough that I was not behindhand with him in the long conversation which passed between us. I do not know, Don Quixote, observed the scholar at this point, how your worship could have seen so many things and heard and said so much in such a short space of time you were down below. How long was I down? Asked Don Quixote. A little more than an hour, answered Sancho. That cannot be right, said Don Quixote, for night fell there and morning rose, and 3 more nights and mornings, so that by my reckoning I must have stayed 3 days in those remote and secret regions. My master should be speaking the truth, said Sancho, for as everything has happened to him is by way of an enchantment, perhaps what seems to us an hour may seem 3 days and nights down there. That will be right, answered Don Quixote. And did your worship eat anything in all that time, sir? Asked the scholar. I did not break my fast with even a mouthful, answered Don Quixote. I had not so much as a thought of hunger. And the enchanted, do they eat? Asked the scholar. No, they do not, answered Don Quixote. Nor do they defecate, although it has been believed that their nails grow and their beards and hair. So when our Lord resurrected from the dead and was around and about for 40 days, it has been noted on more than one occasion by the gospel writers that he did what? Yes.
That he ate food?
That he ate food. After our Lord arose from the dead, there is more than one remarking that he ate. Why?
Because he was in his glorified body.
He was actually a man. He was still man, and men need to eat. So when they call heaven the divine banquet, you know what that implies, don't you?
They eat.
Yeah.
So hypothetically, you
Also
could
the
die.
other, I don't know.
No, you could die if you didn't eat.
No, because it will all be for pleasure. It'll all be for fun. Not because you have to.
Oh, so your body is perfect no
Your
matter
body's
what.
perfect, doesn't need to be.
But it's
perfect.
just if you feel like eating, you can eat.
Yeah, what about the souls in hell? The souls in hell are probably, oh. Right now? No, because they're without their bodies. They're just spirits right now. But so the point of asking about do they eat is a very solid one. Because if they don't eat, they're not real. They're not flesh real. What could they be?
Spirits.
Spirits. AKA demons. Or angels, or in Hamlet, ghosts, poor souls. Yeah. But if you're under enchantment and you don't think to eat, it's something spiritual that's going on. And if that's the case, then 1 hour could seem like 3 days.
Wait,
No.
if you're possessed, do you ever eat? Right? Because the devil would have
Well, but the the body has to stay alive for the spirit. Yeah, they have to. And do the enchanted sleep by any chance, sir? Asked Sancho. No, certainly not, answered Don Quixote. At least in those 3 days that I was with them, none of them closed an eye, and neither did I. Here's where the proverb fits, said Sancho. Tell me what company you keep, and I will tell you who you are. Your worship goes about with the enchanted who watch and fast. It's no wonder then that you didn't eat or sleep whilst you were in their company. But pardon me if I say, your worship, that of all you have said, God help me, I was going to say the devil if I believed one word. Why not? Asked the scholar. Why would Don Quixote lie? Why, even if he had wanted to, he had not time to compose and invent such a multitude of fictions. I don't believe that my master is lying, answered Sancho. "And what do you believe?" asked Don Quixote. "I believe," answered Sancho, "that this Merlin of the enchanters who bewitched that whole crowd your worship tells us you saw and talked with down below, crammed all that rigmarole you've told us into your head, and what remains to be told as well." "All that could be so," replied Don Quixote, "but it is not. For what I told you I saw with my own eyes and touched with my own hands. But what will you say when I tell you now that among the countless marvelous things that Montesinos showed me, which I shall proceed to tell you of at leisure and in due course during our journey, for they do not all belong here, were 3 peasant girls leaping and frisking like she-goats in those pleasant fields, and no sooner did I see them than I realized that one of them was the peerless Dulcinea del Toboso, and the other 2 those same 2 country girls who we were with when we met them on their way out of El Toboso. I asked Montesinos whether he knew them. He answered no, but that he thought they must be some enchanted ladies of quality, for they had only appeared in those fields a few days before. But I need not be surprised at that, for there were many other ladies of past and present times there, transformed into different strange shapes, and among them he had recognized Queen Guinevere and her attendant, Quinta Enora, who poured out the wine for Lancelot when from Britain first he came. I don't get it. On hearing this, Sancho thought he would go out of his wits or die of laughing. For knowing as he did the truth about Dulcinea's pretended enchantment, and that he had been her enchanter and the inventor of the story, he finally realized, beyond all doubt, that his master was out of his mind and mad on all accounts. Yes.
That was Sancho.
So Sancho's point is, how could, if this were a real interlocution or some sort of mystical event, how could it be that those peasant girls were in this field, in this enchantment? Because they were just peasant girls that Sancho pointed out and pretended was Dulcinea because he needed to produce somebody as Dulcinea, because he didn't actually see Dulcinea or find her or ever. So now he knows it's all just in Don Quixote's mind, he's saying to himself, because nobody else, because it wasn't actually Dulcinea, so she wouldn't appear anywhere else as Dulcinea because it wasn't. Right? "I'm amused, though," said Sancho, "that your worship didn't spring. Oh, whoops, sorry. At an evil time, in a worse season, and on a bitter day, did your worship descend to the other world, dear master, and it was an unlucky moment when you met with Sir Montesinos, who has so changed you for us. You were all right up here, with your wits whole, as God gave them to you, uttering judgments and offering counsel at every step, and not as you are now, talking the greatest nonsense imaginable." "As I know you, Sancho," said Don Quixote, "I take no notice of your words." "Not I of yours either," answered Sancho, "though you may beat me or kill me for what I've said, and for what I mean to say if you don't correct and mend your own. But tell me, your worship, now that we're at peace, how or by what signs did you recognize the lady our mistress? And if you spoke to her, what did she say and how did you reply?" "I recognized her," said Don Quixote, "because she had on the same clothes as she was wearing when you pointed her out to me. I spoke to her, but she did not answer a word. On the contrary, she turned her back and ran away so fast that an arrow would not have caught her. I made to follow her and would have done so if Montesinos had not advised me not to tire myself in that way, for it would be in vain. And what is more, it was high time for me to return out of the cave. He also told me that in course of time he would advise me on a means of disenchanting him and Belerma and Durandarte and everyone there. But what distressed me most of all I saw and noted was that just as Montesinos was speaking, one of the luckless Dulcinea's 2 companions drew near my side without my seeing her come, and with her eyes full of tears said to me in low and troubled tones, 'My lady Dulcinea del Toboso kisses your worship's hands and implores you to let you know how you are, and as she is in great want, she also begs your worship most earnestly to be good as to lend her 6 reals on this new cotton skirt I have here, or as many as your worship has about you. She promised to pay you back in a very short time. Such an errand surprised and amazed me, and I turned to Montesinos and asked him, is it possible, Sir Montesinos, for people of quality when enchanted to be in want? To which he replied, believe me, Don Quixote, what they call want is usual everywhere, extends to all regions, reaches everyone, and does not even spare the enchanted. So, as the lady Dulcinea de Savosa has sent to ask you for 6 reals, and the security is apparently good, there's nothing for it but to give them to her, and no doubt she must be in some difficulty. A pledge I will not take, I replied, nor can I give her what she asked for all I have got is 4 reals. Those I gave her, they were the ones you gave me, Sancho, the other day, to give in alms to any poor we might meet on the roads. And I said to her, friend, tell your mistress that I am grieved in spirit at her troubles, and that I wish I were frugal that I might relieve them. Say that I would have her know that I neither can nor may have help, lacking her pleasing company and her wise conversation, and that I beg her with all possible earnestness to be so good as to allow her captive servant and travel-weary knight to see and address her. You will also say to her that, when she least expects it, she will hear that I have made an oath and vow, like that which the Marquis of Mantua made to avenge his nephew Baldwin, when he found him on the point of death in the midst of the mountains, which was to eat no bread off tablecloths, and sundry additional trifles till he had obtained his revenge. So too shall I swear, not to rest, and not to trouble the 7 portions of the earth more diligently than did Don Pedro of Portugal, until I have released her from her enchantment. All that and more your worship owes my lady, replied the maiden. And taking the 4 reals, instead of making me a curtsy, she cut a caper, and leapt 2 yards by measure into the air. Holy Father, Sancho broke in at this point in a loud voice, are such things possible in the world? Can there be enchanters and enchantments so strong as to have changed my master's sound wits into this raving madness? Oh, sir, in God's name, look out for yourself. Think of your good name, and don't believe in these bubbles that have spoilt and crazed your wits. Ghosts don't take money. It is because you love me, Sancho, that you talk like this, said Don Quixote, and as you are not experienced in the affairs of this world, anything that has any difficulty about it seems to you impossible. But the time will come, as I have told you already, when I shall relate to you some of the things I saw down there, and they will make you believe what I have said, for their truth admits of no reply or controversy. In which 1,000 trifles are recounted as nonsensical as they are necessary to the true understanding of this great history. Does anyone have a single word of explanation of what's going on here? No. Does the Purgatorio come in at all? Was there ever an exchange of money in the Purgatorio? There were definitely, well, not in Purgatory. There were people who didn't seem to be who they were. That was only hell, right? Coco, anything? Nina? Bella? Nothing. Mary? We got nothing. Nina, will you read a bit, please? Chapter 24.
Chapter 24, in which 1,000 trifles are recounted as nonsensical, as they are necessary to the true understanding of this great history. The translator of this great history from the original written by its first author, Said Hemet Benengeli, says that when he reached the chapter relating the adventures of Montesinos' cave, he found written in the margin in the hand of the same Hemet these words: I cannot persuade myself that all that is written in the previous chapter literally happened to the valorous Don Quixote. The reason is that all the adventures till now have been feasible and probable, but this one of the cave I can find no way of accepting as true, for it exceeds all reasonable bounds. But I cannot possibly suppose that Don Quixote, who was the most truthful gentleman and the noblest knight of his age, could be lying. For even if he were riddled with arrows, he would not tell a lie. Besides, if I consider the minute and circumstantial details he entered into, it seems an even greater impossibility that he could have manufactured such a great mass of extravagance in so short a time. So if this adventure seems apocryphal, it is not I that am to blame, for I write it down without affirming its truth or falsehood. You, judicious reader, must judge for yourself, for I cannot and should not do more. One thing, however, is certain, that finally he retracted it on his deathbed, and confessed that he had invented it, since it seemed to him to fit in with the adventures he had read of in his stories. With that the author continued saying, the scholar was astonished alike at Sancho Panza's boldness and at his master's patience, and concluded that the placid disposition he then displayed arose from his pleasure at seeing his lady Dulcinea del Toboso, even though enchanted. For were it not the case, Sancho's speeches and arguments would have earned him a thrashing, since really, thought the scholar, he had been a little too saucy with his master, whom he thus addressed. Don Quixote de la Mancha, I reckon this day I have spent with you very well spent. What? I reckon this day I have spent with you very well spent, for in it I have gained 4 things. First, my acquaintance with your worship, which is a great pleasure to me. Secondly, a solution of the secret of Montesinos' cave, of the metamorphoses of Gardina, and of the lagoons of Ridera, all of which will serve me for the Spanish Ovid and I have in mind. Thirdly, to have discovered the antiquity of playing cards, which were in use as far back as the time of the Emperor Charlemagne, as can be deduced from the words you attribute to Durandarte, when at the end of Montesinos' great speech he woke up and said, "Patience and shuffle the cards." He cannot have learnt that expression or turn of phrase under a spell, but must have done so before he was enchanted in France and in the time of the aforesaid emperor. Now this discovery comes just right for the other book I am compiling, which is the supplement to Polydore Virgil on the inventions of antiquity. For I believe that he forgot to include the invention of cards, as I shall now do, for it is of great importance, particularly as I shall be able to quote so serious and truthful an informant as Sir Durandante. Fourthly, to have learnt for certain the source of the river Gardina, until now unknown to men. You are right, said Don Quixote, but I should like to know to whom you intend to dedicate them. Supposing by God's favor you are granted a license to print these books of yours, which I doubt. There are lords and grandees in Spain to whom they might be dedicated, replied the scholar. Not many, replied Don Quixote, not because they do not deserve the dedication, but because they do not like to accept them in case they may be under the obligation of making the authors the return to which they are entitled for their labor and courtesy. But I know a prince can supply the defects of all the rest, with such advantage that if I may bold to mention that with such advantages that if I made bold to mention them, I should perhaps awaken the jealousy of more than one generous soul. But let the matter rest here until a more opportune time, and let us go and look for somewhere to lodge tonight. Not far from here, said their guide, is a hermitage where dwells a hermit, who is said to have been a soldier once, and has the reputation of being a good Christian, and very wise and charitable as well. Beside his hermitage he has a little house, which he has built at his own cost, but though it is small, it is big enough to receive guests. Does this hermit happen to keep chickens? Asked Sancho. Few hermits are without them, answered Don Quixote, for those you find today are not like the anchorites in the Egyptian desert, who used to wear palm leaves and eat the roots of the earth. It must not be supposed that because I speak well of the ancients, it is at the expense of the hermits of today. I only mean to say that the present-day penances do not equal the rigorous and austerities of olden times. But they are all good, nevertheless. At least I consider them good. The worst comes to worst, the hypocrite who pretends to be good does less harm than the public sinner. Whilst they were talking, they saw a man on foot overtaking them, walking fast and prodding with his stick a mule loaded with lances and halberds. On coming up, he greeted them and passed. Don Quixote, however, called out, "Stop, my good fellow. You seem to be going faster than your mule wants to." "I can't stop, sir," replied the man, "for these weapons you see me carrying are needed for tomorrow. So I'm compelled to press on. Goodbye. But if you want to know the reason why I'm carrying these things, I might mean to put up today at the inn beyond the hermit. If you're traveling the same way, you'll find me there, and I'll tell you some wonders. So goodbye once more." And he prodded his mule on so fast that Don Quixote had no time to ask him what wonders he had to tell them. But as he was rather curious and always possessed by the desire to learn something new, he decided that they should press on that moment so as to spend the night at the inn, and not stop at the hermitage where the scholar wanted them to stay. So all three mounted and took the straight road to the inn, which they reached a little before nightfall. On the way, the scholar suggested to Don Quixote that they should call at the hermitage to get a drop to drink, and when Sancho heard him, he turned Dapple in that direction, Don Quixote and the scholar taking the same way. But as Sancho's ill luck would have it, the hermit was not at home, as they were told by an under hermitess, whom they found in the hermitage. They asked for a drop of the real stuff, but she replied that her master did not keep it, though if they would like water for nothing, she would give it them with pleasure. If I had a water thirst, replied Sancho, there are wells on the road where I could have quenched it. Oh, Camacho's wedding and the plenty of Don Diego's, how often I miss you. Now they left the hermitage and spurred towards the inn, and a little farther on they fell in with a lad who was strolling along in front of them at so slow a pace that they overtook him. He was carrying a sword on his shoulder and slung on it a bundle or package, apparently containing clothes, his breeches, cloak, and shirt probably, for he had on a short velvet jacket, in places rubbed shiny as satin, and his shirt hung out. His stockings were soaked and his shoes square-toed after the court fashion. He must have been 18 or 19, and he had a merry face and an agile-looking body. As he went along, he sang scraps of songs to relieve the tediousness of the road, and when they caught him up he had just ended one, which the scholar got by heart, and which went, "To the wars I am driven by lack of pence. If I had them, nothing would get me hence." The first to speak to him was Don Quixote, who said, "You travel very light, Sir Gallant, whither bound? Tell us, if you please." To which the lad replied, "Heat and poverty are my reasons of my traveling so light, and it's the wars I am bound for." "How poverty?" asked Don Quixote. "It is a likely enough reason." "Sir," replied the lad, in this bundle I have a pair of velvet breeches, the fellows to this jacket. If I wear them out on the road, I shan't be able to cut a dash in them in the city, and I have no money to buy others. So for that reason, and to cool myself, I'm traveling like this until I catch up with some companies of infantry, which are less than 40 miles from here. I shall enlist with them, and there will be no lack of baggage wagons to travel on from there to the port of Embarcacion, which is said to be Cartagena. For I'd rather have the king for my lord and master, and serve him in the wars, than some frayed fellow at court." "Do you get an allowance by any chance?" asked the scholar. "If I'd served a grandee of Spain or an important personage," replied the lad, "I should most certainly have one, for that is what comes of serving good masters. Their men generally rise from the servants' hall to be ensigns or captains, or to some other good appointment. But I, poor wretch, have always served adventurers and hangers-on, whose pay and rations were so miserably short that they'd be half spent on starching one ruff. It'd be a miracle indeed for a page to an adventurer to get a stroke of luck." "But tell me honestly," asked Don Quixote, "is it possible that in all the years you served you were not even able to lay hands on a livery?" "I've had two given me," answered the page, "but just as, if a man leaves a monastery without taking his vows, they strip him of his habit and give him back his clothes. So my masters returned me mine. For when the business they came to court for was done, they returned home and took back the liveries, which they had only given out for show." "A notable splioceria, as the Italians say," remarked Don Quixote. "But count yourself lucky, all the same, to be coming away from the court with so laudable an intention, for there is nothing on earth more honorable and more profitable than to serve God first, and then your king and natural lord, especially in the profession of arms, which may not gain you more riches than letters, but win you more honors, as I have very often said. For though letters may have been the foundation of more estates than arms, still soldiers have an indefinable superiority over men of letters, and a certain splendor about them which puts them above everybody. Bear in mind what I am now going to say to you, for it will be of great profit and comfort to you in your hardships. It is that you should dismiss from your mind all thought of possible disasters, for the worst of them is death, and to die an honorable death is the best fortune of all. The brave Roman Emperor Julius Caesar, when asked which was the best death, replied the unexpected, the sudden and the unforeseen. And although this was the reply of a heathen ignorant of the true God, yet considering human infirmity, he was right. For supposing you are killed in the first engagement or skirmish, or by a cannon shot, or the springing of a mine, what does it matter? It is but death, and there is an end. And, as Terence says, a soldier looks better slain in battle than alive and safe in flight. And the more obedient he is to his captains and commanders, the higher does the good soldier rise in fame. Mark, my son, that gunpowder is a more pleasing smell to a soldier than civet. And if old age overtakes you in this honorable profession, though you may not be full of wounds, crippled and lamed, at least it will not find you without honor, and honor such as poverty will not be able to diminish. What is more, it is now being enacted that old and crippled soldiers are to be maintained and relieved, for it is not right that they should be treated like blacks, whose masters release them and grant them their liberty when they are old and cannot work, and by casting them out of the house with the title of free men, make them the slaves of hunger, from whom they can only hope to be freed by death. I will say no more for present, but get you up on the haunches of this steed of mine as far as the inn. There you will dine with me and continue your journey tomorrow, and may God speed you according to your merit. The page refused his invitation to ride behind, but he accepted the supper at the inn, and Sancho is said to have muttered to himself at this point, God bless you, what a master he is. It is possible for a man who can say all the good things he's just said to swear that he saw all the absurd impossibilities he has told us about Montesino's cave. Well, well, we shall see. At this they reached the inn just as night was falling, and it was no small pleasure to Sancho to find that his master took it for a real inn and not, as usual, for a castle. And no sooner had they gone in than Don Quixote asked the innkeeper for the man with the lances and halberds, and he replied that he was in the stable attending to his mule. The scholar and Sancho then looked to their asses, and Sancho gave Rocinante the best rack and the best stall in the stable.
Thank you. So they followed the other guy that they met on the road who wouldn't stop. And then they talked to this kid who was a soldier. He's like, don't worry about it. If you die, it's good. And now we met back up with the guy you wanted to talk to because he didn't stop at the Hermitage. I have that right?
Mhm.
What? It's so cold. We will see you after break at 10:25. We shall continue.